The cabin that waited. The cabin sat alone at the edge of Blackwood Forest, shrouded in shadows from the thick canopy above. No one lived in it anymore, not since the Parker family vanished without a trace 5 years ago. Locals called it the cabin that waited, and though the name was vague, everyone seemed to understand what it meant. Some claim that if you stayed the night in that cabin, you'd disappear too, becoming part of whatever dark secret lay hidden within its walls. Kate had heard all the stories. She just moved to Blackwood for a new job, and the cabin rumors were everywhere. But she dismissed them as nothing more than small-town gossip, stories meant to keep thrill-seekers out of the woods. To her, a weekend camping trip near the cabin was the perfect way to unwind and settle into her new town. Her friends Lily, Ben, and Jake thought it sounded like fun, too. They'd all heard the stories, and the idea of testing the legend only added to the thrill. They packed up their camping gear and headed into the forest on a Friday afternoon, laughing off the warnings from the townsfolk as they made their way to the cabin. The structure was older than Kate had expected, with faded wood that looked nearly gray and a sagging roof that creaked ominously. But it seemed sturdy enough, and after a quick inspection, they decided it was safe to stay the night. The inside was musty, the air thick with a scent that was hard to place, something stale and damp, mixed with the faintest hint of smoke. The cabin was furnished with only a few pieces, a warped table, a couple of chairs, and a bed with a sagging mattress. There was a fireplace, cold and unused, its brick face darkened by years of soot. As night fell, the friends gathered around the fire they'd built outside, telling ghost stories and roasting marshmallows. But as the darkness thickened, the forest seemed to close in around them. Shadows stretched longer, the trees creaked in the wind, and the air grew unnaturally cold. Around midnight, the strange feeling in the air became impossible to ignore. A thick fog rolled in, blanketing the forest floor, and their fire flickered, its warmth suddenly fading. "I think we should go inside," Jake said, glancing nervously at the surrounding woods. "It's freezing out here." The others agreed, gathering their things and moving into the cabin. They closed the door against the chill, and for a moment, it felt better inside, warmer, somehow. But then they noticed it, a faint smell of smoke, drifting through the air. "Is that from the fire?" Lily asked, frowning. "We put it out before coming inside," Ben replied, his voice uneasy. The smell grew stronger, filling the cabin until it was nearly suffocating. It felt as though the smoke were pressing down on them, thick and heavy, curling into every corner. "Maybe we should open a window," Kate suggested, moving toward one of the cracked panes. But as she did, something caught her eye. On the far wall, just above the fireplace, a faint outline appeared, as though something were burned into the wood. It was the outline of a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. The figures were crude, nothing more than darkened shapes against the wood, but they were unmistakably human. "That wasn't there before, was it?" Ben whispered, his eyes wide. "No," Kate replied, feeling a cold sweat break out on her skin. They stared at the burned figures, an uneasy silence settling over them. Then, faintly, they heard it, a low whisper, barely audible, drifting through the air. "Help us." The voice was soft, desperate, and it seemed to echo through the room. Kate felt a shiver run down her spine as the words repeated, growing louder. "Help us, please." Jake backed away from the wall, his face pale. "This is crazy. We need to get out of here." He turned toward the door, but when he tried to open it, the handle wouldn't budge. He twisted it, pulled, even tried to kick the door down, but it was as though the cabin itself was holding them inside. "We're trapped," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Help us," the voice whispered again, now coming from all around them, filling the room with an eerie, hollow sound. Who are you?" Kate asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted an answer. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in the corner of the room, shadows began to gather, thickening and twisting until they took on a shape, a figure, gaunt and hollow-eyed, staring at them with a look of endless sorrow. "We are the ones who came before," the figure whispered, its voice like dried leaves rustling in the wind. "We are the ones who could not leave." Kate felt her heart race as the figure extended a bony hand, pointing to the burned outline on the wall. "The fire, it trapped us here, bound us to this place. And now you are bound, too." "No," Ben said, shaking his head. "No, we're getting out of here." He ran to the window, throwing his weight against it, but it was like slamming into solid rock. The glass didn't even crack. Desperate, he turned back to the others, his face contorted with fear. "We can't be trapped. There has to be a way out," he shouted. The figure watched them, its dark eyes empty and sad. The cabin takes what it wants. It waits until it is hungry again. The smoke grew thicker, filling their lungs, making it hard to breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the room growing smaller, the shadows darker and darker. Kate felt herself growing dizzy, her vision blurring as the voices grew louder, overlapping, filling her mind with a cacophony of whispers. "Stay with us, join us." Kate stumbled backward, her head spinning. She reached out, grabbing Lily's hand, trying to anchor herself. But as she looked around, she realized her friends were fading, their faces growing distant and blurred. "No," she whispered, but her voice was weak, barely a breath. "No, this isn't real." The last thing she saw was the outline of the burned family, watching her with hollow eyes as the darkness swallowed her whole. The next morning, a pair of hikers found the cabin empty, but there were new outlines burned into the wall, for new figures, huddled together, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. The hikers quickly left, and they told the townspeople what they'd seen. And now, the legend of the cabin that waited grows. They say it only gets hungrier with time, that it takes more every few years. And on cold autumn nights, if you listen closely, you might hear the whispers of the lost, calling to anyone who dares come too close. Stay with us, join us, forever.